everyone, and welcome back to the Adcast, a podcast for the study of modern visual culture. I'm your rad Shiba Renu.
And I'm your tired late 20s bartender, Soup.
This episode, AT stands for Alcohol Transformation, because we'll be talking about Valhalla cyberpunk bartending action. But before we get into that, what have we been up to?
Oh boy, what haven't we been up to?
A whole season has passed.
Yeah, a whole season has passed, and at this point, our yearly summer hiatus has come to an end, I guess.
That's true. We do tend to take a break around summer because we're both, it's just the season where people are all doing things and traveling and all sorts of stuff, so.
It is the season where people do things, yeah.
'Tis the season. It's pretty rare, but sometimes we're able to get an episode out during the summer, but it's not often, unfortunately.
Well, I was gonna say, you end up having a lot of cons in the summer, don't you?
Yes, convention season is summer, and then, of course, that's also when people want to do vacation things too, so...
Yeah,
it's just a mixture.
Well, this year, special busyness. I had a wedding.
Yes, you did.
which you went to.
I did. I got to see you in person, and we talked about how many years it's been since we met up in person.
It's actually kind of crazy when I think about it. It has been so long at this point. I was thinking about the other day. I was thinking about how long the podcast has been going.
Yeah.
Which, 6 some years. It's pretty good.
Roughly, yeah. Yeah, pretty good.
Pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I was also when you proposed a Valhalla episode, I was like, oh yeah, cool. We can do a Valhalla episode. I can do a, I could do with playing that game again. And I looked, and the game came out in 2016. And that is so long ago now.
Before we started the podcast, though.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What was it like back then?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It was a different time. I apparently have every achievement in this game.
That's crazy. I wonder how many I have. I think I got all of the endings except for the bad one. Because I was it was kind of a nothing ending.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah,
but,
it's the one
but there's an achievement tied to it.
I guess if I want to be homeless and then move in with our best friend, and she is great. Yeah. Oh, I got 29 out of 34. Heck, I've clearly got more work to do.
Have you done the little bullet hell mini game?
I did, but it looks like I didn't win it. I don't think I actually beat it.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, it was pretty hard when I remember.
That was probably the thing I spent the most time doing.
Really?
Outside of playing the actual game. Yeah, I think that one took the most time because the rest of them are just get all the ending.
All right.
Which isn't too hard.
No, it's not. You can usually get it within 1 to 2 playthroughs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I remember back when I played it that I think you could only see a select number. You could only get a select number of endings at once. But I think that they've since fixed that. Either that or I'm remembering incorrectly. Yeah, because I definitely saw every ending play back to back when I played this time. Anything else that you've been up to?
Not really aside from convention season. That's basically been it. Convention season and then your wedding. Yeah, that's all that's taken up my summer. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a busy summer for me. Obviously, I had a wedding.
Mm-hmm.
It would not be terribly accurate to say that I got married because I have been married, but I had a wedding. And
you had the courthouse wedding, and then you had the courthouse marriage, and then you had the wedding later.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And now we're planning for honeymoon sometime next year.
Honeymoon! Ew!
Yeah, we're gonna spend 2 weeks in Japan. It's gonna be cool.
Ah, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Do you guys know what you're gonna do in Japan?
Well, we're gonna do whatever seems cool.
Because I know you've been before.
I've been before, but I've never been to Tokyo.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I went for a couple of days a number of years ago with my family, and we only stayed in, like, Osaka and Kyoto, basically.
Oh, okay.
So, this will be a first time going to Tokyo.
Oh, that's fun. I kind of basically did the reverse. I did 2 weeks in Tokyo and didn't really get to see much else. So I would love to go back and see everything else.
Yeah, it's funny. I got to see Kiyomizu Temple, the temple that shows up in all of the anime.
Yes, yes.
Like, it's always like the Tokyo kids go for a field trip to Kyoto, and they go see the big temple, and you see all the stairs. I was like, hey, I've seen this in my animes.
Nerd.
Aside from that, it is also busy because it has been about a month and some number of weeks. It's probably like 2 months now, actually, since the launch of the latest Final Fantasy XIV expansion.
Yes.
Which is it's a busy time. There's a lot of stuff to do in the video game, you know?
Is there still a bunch of stuff to do?
They do give it regular content updates. Like, obviously,
okay.
When the expansion launches, there is, like, the main story quest to do, and then once you're done with the main story, you get to unlock the optional dungeons to get the expert, like, roulette, and it's usually, I think, 2 weeks after the official launch of the game for the normal raid series to come out, which is the casual, easy version of the raids. And then it's like another 2 weeks until they release the Savage raids. So it is, and those are like the hard, like, actual, like, difficult content raids.
Okay.
And then that goes on for a couple of months. Technically, the raid tier goes on for a long time. They've said that they're gonna do a longer expansion cycle. Usually they're 2 years. This time they said it'll be 3. So basically, every update will just be a little bit less frequent. It used to be like every month to 2 months, and now it's like every 3 months, right?
Okay.
But yeah, there's always stuff to do. I mean, there's like a bunch of stuff in the game that, like, I haven't really, like, gotten very much into. Obviously, I have done some of the Savage raids. I cleared this current tier recently, just last week. I finished the last fight, and but, like, there's still stuff I haven't touched. Like, there's older Savages, obviously, that you can do. There's a bunch of Legacy Ultimates. They're gonna launch another Ultimate in a number of weeks, probably. It's 7.15, actually, so it's probably, like... Well, okay, I say a number of weeks. It's probably a number of months, actually, now that I think about it. It'll probably be sometime in the winter, if I had to take a guess.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I just assumed that you've already done everything.
No,
like,
I mean, there's a lot of stuff to do. Like, I haven't touched any of the. I basically haven't touched any of the Ultimate content. Like, I have done a little bit of the first one. Well, I guess it's the second Ultimate, but it's the first one that people recommend getting into because it's the easier one.
Sure.
So, yeah, I've poked my head in there a couple of times. But I have not, like, committed to finishing it. But, you know, right now, like, the raid tier is alive and well. There's weekly lockouts on loot, so basically you do it, like, every week.
Right.
And that's what you spend your time doing. And there's also, like, other stuff that, you know, you could always sink a bunch of time into. They have a bunch of time sink content, for sure.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah. Well, like, obviously, with the launch of a new expansion, they raised the level cap 10 levels, so you have to level all of the jobs again.
Oh, right.
Because they were all maxed out, and now they're not.
Right. There's always something to do. Oh, that's great. I'm glad you're able to continue playing this game you love so much.
Yeah. I mean, it's been great. Recently, two of my friends went through and finished Endwalker, which was the last expansion, which is like really the big like milestone expansion in terms of like the main story, right?
Yeah.
Everything that happens after that is kind of like, you know, it's not like it's just different, you know, it's a different vibe.
Okay.
It's very like side content feeling, but like not necessarily in a bad way. Depends on who you ask.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm having fun with it. Gonna be playing probably for a while. Probably be playing like pretty. I mean, you know, obviously with the expansion launch, there's a bunch of new stuff to do right at the start. So we're just coming off of the peak of that, because that was like a couple of weeks ago when the raids, like when the harder raids launched. So
yeah.
But it's been like 6-ish weeks, I think. Yeah, it's been 6 weeks since those came out. And as a result, the level of activities that you have to keep up with has gone down. Like it's we're not peaked anymore, you know? Like it's like really high week 1 and 2, and then it usually like evens out a little bit from there.
Right. So. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. That's fun.
Cool.
Yeah. This tier I cleared 3 out of the 4 fights the first week, and then I took a little break. And then I just cleared the last one last week.
Okay. No weddings to interfere with that.
No, I mean luckily all of that happened like right after the wedding, right? So I was still kind of reeling. I was like, "Oh." But it was all right. It was fun.
Okay, good.
Yeah, obviously there's like usually a lot of like toys to play with, you know, a lot of new stuff to do. There's a little bit less in terms of like how the classes have changed, just because they were just like, well, we didn't really focus on that much for this expansion. They're just gonna kind of be the same as last expansion with like a couple of new buttons,
right?
And then we'll wrap back around to looking at all of the classes back in 8.0, which will be whatever the next expansion is. So yeah, we'll see what they mean by that.
Do they like, how often do they release expansions?
So about every 2-ish years. It's like 2 years between the launch of the expansion and like the launch of the next one. This time they said it would be 3, so they have already basically said it would be 3. Endwalker was a little bit longer as well. Obviously because it was supposed to launch at a time that was not very convenient. Because suddenly nobody could go into the office to work for some mysterious reason. I was gonna say,
wasn't that... Well, okay, right. Okay. I was gonna say, was that during the end times?
Yeah, so...
Yeah, okay. That makes sense, yeah.
So yeah, we're very solidly in Dawn Trail now, in the Dawn Trail era. We'll see what they do with the direction of the game for the next like 10 years or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like people are still super down with it.
Yeah.
Given with this latest expansion too, so that's good to see.
Yeah, people are... Well, people will always have their complaints. A lot of people have complained about the story this time. I think it's fine.
Oh, okay.
But game's still fun, so I will continue to play it.
Okay.
You want to talk about Valhalla?
Yeah. It's time to mix drinks and change lives.
Yeah. Doing that thing. Well, for those of you that have not heard, Valhalla is a 2016 visual novel developed by Sukeban Games. which revolves around serving drinks to a variety of customers in a cyberpunk setting. It is a game that aims to be more about like average people rather than like the super important main character types. You know, your cyber criminal edge runners or your tragic anti-heroes.
What could you be referencing?
Yeah. What possibly could I be referencing? The visual style of the game is... I actually didn't know this before, but the visual style of the game is based on PC 98 visual novels, so like really kind of old school stuff.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. But like when I went to go look up the game for fun facts and stuff, and to like double check that I was getting facts right, and I was like, oh, it's based on PC 98 games. Interesting.
Yeah, but it has its like really own distinct style, so you wouldn't necessarily think of that right away unless you were pretty deep into, I would say, or pretty familiar with PC 98 novels. Yeah.
I mean, at this point, like, you know, it was a long time ago.
Yeah, I
mean, those are quite a long time ago.
I really like that era of pixel art. It was really, really good, especially the character illustrations. Really good. So,
very good pixel art era. I mean, even 2016 feels like it was forever ago, because it was like forever ago.
Yes.
But yeah, so it's basically a cyberpunk game, except it's not about the cyberpunks. It's just about normal people who can be punks.
They can be punks, and you are a bartender who serves drinks to all of your customers, and that's the game.
That's the game. It's a visual novel. The main gameplay mechanic is serving drinks by mixing a bunch of miscellaneous chemicals together. There's a little recipe book that tells you how to make all the stuff that people ask for, and there are some drinks that have an optional alcohol, a variable alcohol amount that you can change, and you will get different dialogue depending on how much alcohol you serve people, whether you get their orders correct or not, etc., etc., etc.
Yep. Yeah, it's really fun.
I would recommend playing it. It is a game I hold very near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, I would recommend it as well if you are the type of person who enjoys story-heavy games. I mean, if you're playing a visual novel, then you should be anyway. And I would say this one is quite strong in the character writing. So, I mean, it gripped me right away too.
There are a bunch of like things that happen, like a bunch of big events, but because you are playing from the perspective of the bartender,
right?
You don't really see much of it, really. It just kind of happens, and you can see how it affects like the characters who come into the bar, which is nice. I like that. I mean, honestly, this is the kind of game that like that I would want to make, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
It's very my vibe kind of game.
Yeah.
So I think it's no surprise that I quite like this game. I own some of the memorabilia. Like I have the plushie and the Nendroid.
That's awesome. I bought a friend of mine one of the official Rad Shiba t-shirts that they made in collaboration with another company.
Nice. There is like a central like sort of plot through line revolving around the main character Jill.
Yes.
Who basically just comes to terms with her like past and grows as a person and learns to process grief and let go and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty fun because you as a bartender, you do your bartender thing, you hear out people's stories, they make conversation with you, and you kind of learn about their backstories and in a way help them cope by almost being like a sounding board for their problems and all that kind of stuff, and help them deal with their loss and grief or whatever's going on in their lives. And then the game intentionally kind of flips that around on you, or out on Jill, I should say, and then has her confront some of her problems, and she ends up being a customer briefly in the game too.
Yeah, it's very much the like bartender TM kind of game, you know.
Yeah.
You will be serving people drinks, and
Mhm.
they will be open with you or they won't, you know, and it
Mhm.
just kind of depends.
Mhm.
I do kind of like that there is value in replaying the game and
Yeah.
getting like quite different dialogue in depending on like how you serve people, you
Yes.
know, because
Mhm.
if you just serve them, you know, what they ask for, you'll get the like base experience. You know, if you
Yeah.
happen to give them a lot of alcohol, like people will kind of open up and like loosen their inhibitions, and like, you know, people say all kinds of things when they're under the influence.
Yeah. Nothing to speaking nothing on like actual like bartender like ethics and that kind of thing, like getting your patrons as drunk as possible kind of deal. But the game does have like a response to that if you intentionally try to
Yeah.
inebriate them. Yeah.
Some of the interesting, some of the very interesting stuff comes out when you get characters drunk.
Yeah, some of them like change personalities almost. Like they present themselves one way and then when they're drunk they're a completely different person almost.
It's also the only way you get to hear about the Mega Santa gangbang.
Yay.
Yay! Yippee!
Yippee! Love hearing about that.
Yeah, so
hmm
I would die for Jill. Just as far as a character goes, I don't think a character has ever been more perfectly crafted for my tastes.
Right, she feels so very your vibe.
Yeah, I mean, she is a tired late 20s person in a job that she doesn't really, she feels kind of like ambivalent about, and she has a bunch of baggage that she's really not thinking about most of the time. And
hmm
she's kind of cold and dry and sarcastic and a little off-putting to people, but she also has like the sense of humor of like a 7-year-old.
Yes, it's so funny. She's always giggling about the drink called the bad touch.
The bad touch.
And then when she's not giggling about it, it's because it's serious. And
Big
she's going
wiener.
through some stuff. Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yes, as far as a character goes, perfectly,
Mhm.
absolutely crafted, like a character that was pulled out of my brain. Really.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, you set me up with that, and I'm already on board, right?
Yeah, and she's the main character, which is great.
And she's
Mhm.
the main character. It's actually really interesting playing it this time because I had kind of forgotten this. Like, I knew she was like somewhere in her late 20s, but she's like specifically 27, and I'm 27 now. Oh
It's
my
meant to be.
god.
You
She
were
just
meant
like
to revisit
me.
it. Yeah,
She
this
just like
year.
me for real, for
Just
real.
like you in real life, for real. Yeah, I like that. Also, Jill's personality just kind of like instinctively lends her to being the straight man to all of the rest of the cast, who are they have very colorful personalities.
Yeah, they're fairly eccentric, but you know, otherwise like ordinary people. Like
Yes.
there's the guy that runs the newspaper, or like, you know,
Yes.
just some random guy who just walks in and goes, "Man, this place sucks."
Yeah, that guy. And you get some like unexpected characters too. Like you get a pop star, and you get streamer Chan, and other people that are loosely people is the best way I can describe it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite
Obviously,
fun. Mhm.
as a bartender, you are hearing out their problems. Everybody's got problems. They're all
Mhm.
really like normal problems, right?
Yeah.
You know, some of them are like more serious than others, and like at the end of the day, everybody's like dealing with something. Is something that I quite like in how the game represents its characters.
Yeah,
like,
Go ahead.
I was just to say, like, I like how, for instance, like Alma is like a character whose main sort of thing is just about like being a very family-oriented person and not being able to find a relationship that is conducive to that.
Yeah. I think there's also a bit of an illusion that she might be Alice Rabbit too.
I think that is the
Yeah.
implication. Yeah.
Yeah, so she's got some stuff going on.
She's got some stuff going on. I kind of like that it's the kind of thing where it's not terribly subtle, but it's also not like so explicitly stated, you know?
No, they don't focus on it in any way. It just kind of like you're like, "Oh, is she?" And then they just kind of leave it at that.
I would say in terms of the writing of the game, there are a couple of points that I would say are very good, and one of them is definitely how well thought out the actual setting is.
Yeah.
Despite how kind of vague it is, right? Because it's like generic cyberpunk sort of stuff, but there's also a lot of like quite specific stuff happening in the world, and it just feels very well thought out and very thorough. There's like a lot of stuff that happens that is alluded to but never explained.
Right.
And I like that the game leaves a lot of that kind of open.
Yeah, I like that you don't get concrete answers for absolutely all of your questions, because that's not really how the world works, and the world in that way kind of feels very lived in by nature of how it characterizes its people and how you learn about the world through like news articles and things like that, because you don't get to see all of it because of, you're just a bartender and you only really get to see the interior of the bar and your apartment.
Yeah, you see a very small slice.
Right, exactly. So I think the game kind of has to do a lot of its world building through its writing in those articles and through its characters. Like, by its nature, it just kind of has to do that carrying. And so it has to be very strong. And thankfully, in this game, it is. And it keeps it interesting. I like also that you get reactions of characters to more like philosophical questions. Like they question why the world is the way that it is and things like that. Why certain events happen the way that they did. It's cool. I like it.
Yeah. It has a very... This is like kind of weird. It's a very strange way to think about this, but I think that it is very easy and possible to go into this game and to see a lot of the dialogue and to kind of be taken out of like the immersion of it, because the writing in many ways is very... It's very writing, you know? Like writing, like capital W writing TM, right?
Sure.
Sometimes you just read some dialogue and you're like, yeah, like a guy wrote that in his like on his computer, you know?
Right, you're like, no one talks like this. This is purely just...
like no one talks like this, or even as far as like, if a normal person were to make an attempt at writing dialogue, it would probably be something like this,
Sure.
It's like a little bit awkward sometimes, a little bit stiff, a little bit like, yeah, like this is probably, this is like fake, right? Like this is fiction,
Right.
And while I think that there is a lot of value in, stories that are very immersive and you can lose yourself in them, I also think that that's not necessarily the appeal of this game, because I think that, like, part of the appeal of Valhalla is knowing that you're playing a game, and sometimes they lampshade this with Anna, who is the character that can basically, like, break the fourth wall, right?
Yes.
She is a very like inexplicable character. Like there's some, you learn some stuff about like, oh, it could be this or it could be this. You learn that she kind of has some family stuff going on that is related to a different customer that you have. Dorothy, who is obviously, outside of Jill, my favorite character. But yeah, I mean, I would say that while it is very like writing TM, I really don't hate that about the game. I think it's like a little bit. I think it's a little like it's sincere in a way that I think a lot of fiction tries to avoid being, or it's like the rough edges, right, that you can see and feel that kind of give it a unique texture, It's like, it's because it's not as polished as like another game's writing might be, it's just a very different experience, and one that I don't think is inherently worse.
No,
like,
I mean, yeah.
Because like I just think that's what's really cool about this game is like, while you're playing it, you are constantly reminded of the process of it being a product that was manufactured, right?
Right.
Being a piece of fiction that somebody wrote. And I think like there is some interest and some value in how you can see the human hand behind it, especially obviously, in the modern age. When we have stuff like, AI chatbots and ChatGPT and all of the kind of like, I don't know, we live in a time when the arts are not so terribly valued, right? And it's like basically anything that is just a real sincere piece of work that somebody put out into the world. I think it is really cool to experience that. It feels so much like an indie game,
Yeah.
I think that's what I like about it.
Right. That's basically what I was going to say too, is that I don't hate the fact that it feels like an indie game, because it feels more like a work of art that way. Like, there is definitely a high level of polish to this game. That's not to say that we're saying that it's unprofessional or whatever, because it is. It's a really well done game. But the fact that you can tell that there was a lot of intent and personal investment into the game, and a lot of care taken with the characters helps you endear yourself to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might not get that same feeling to something that's super high polished like a AAA game, right?
Yeah, you can see so much of the creators of the game in it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where I value art like this.
Yeah.
In a way that's like very different from watching an anime.
Yeah.
I do think that the characters are fairly well thought out. I kind of like that, each of them has their own quirks. Like Gil's gimmick is being this guy that like just nobody knows.
Yeah, no one
about.
can figure him out. Yeah.
Like, he's got this extremely sordid, mysterious past that just like never gets explained.
Yeah.
But I also like that, like, I think the game has a pretty solid balance in terms of when there is comedy and when there is levity. Like, it treats moments of importance not lightly. But it also, there is just a sort of absurd air to the setting that is, I think, quite charming. I really like that they took the opportunity to take the kind of cyberpunk setting and really run with all of the weird stuff that happens. Like, I like that there is a corporation that is just made of talking dogs.
Yes, oh my god, the Shivas.
I like that one of the like stories that you get about, kind of low key, you kind of get the story about this employee that worked at Valhalla, Robert, before the game starts who bought a levitation potion, and the problem with it was that it worked, and he levitated up and then died by hitting an airplane.
Right, yeah,
And Gil is like basically like took Robert's identity to like work at the bar.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a ton of really fun lore like that.
Yeah, there's just like a lot of like little details and little stories like that kind of make up the atmosphere in such a way as to feel like fleshed out, you know.
I like that the game doesn't take itself like too seriously. Like it knows how to make fun of itself, and it knows how to make fun of its own characters without, you know, it necessarily being at their expense, right? You still like the characters and care about them, but it doesn't take itself too seriously that where you're like, you feel like it's a drag to play.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely like, it's a little bit sardonic, you know, it's a little like self-aware in ways that are kind of fun.
Yeah.
Like, something that I really like about the way that Jill specifically handles grief, right, is kind of being mad at the fact that it's like happening at all.
Yeah,
You know, she's like, "Oh God, this is so cringe. This is so cliche. Like, I can't believe this. I can't believe that I'm upset about this." Right.
Right.
And I think that that's just a feeling that just kind of resonates, because like when you go through something like that, a lot of the times like your secondary reaction is just like, I can't believe that this is happening. You know,
Right.
I can't believe it's happening like this.
Yes.
You know. But yeah, it is a game that thematically grapples with being in your late 20s and kind of being like lost and directionless, and I think that's like a feeling that is very real, and I do think that it is like drawing from personal experience.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It feels very relatable. Yeah. I mean, I like the way that the game approaches that specific feeling too, because you get all of these people from all sorts of, you know, all walks of life, and they all, in their own ways, are struggling with something or are lost in some kind of problem. And that's like a common thread throughout the conversations and all the people that you meet, is that they've all got some kind of weight, right, that they're carrying around, and it's all different, but the game is kind of also hopeful in that way of like, you know, it's okay that you're struggling. It's okay that, you know, you dropped out of school and you had this bright future ahead of you, and you decided to instead become a bartender to just calm down and separate yourself and figure things out and take some time to think about it. It kind of validates a lot of people's experiences, which I like too.
I mean, it is the most like young adult transitioning into being an adult of all time, right?
Yeah.
it is very funny playing this at, let's see, 8 years ago I was 19. Yeah. Playing this at 19 and then again at 27, which is the age that like a handful of the characters are.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. And again, in terms of how the game feels a lot like a game, and it constantly kind of reminds you of that fact, whether it's intentional or not. There is like a lot of stuff that's like written in the text between characters that is very clearly just like, well, this is how I feel about it, so.
Right.
It is one of those things that's like, there's even a conversation in the game between Jill and Dorothy talking about how, you know, Dorothy's having this like existential crisis of like, well, how do I know that I'm real? How do I know that like my feelings are real? Which is, you know, for her especially a question to have, because she's a Lilim, you know, which is like this like AI that has been given a mechanical body and essentially like experienced a childhood of sorts, right? And overall, I actually really like Dorothy's story, probably the most out of anybody's. Just because I think it's really, it's just very interesting, just from the perspective of, you know, obviously, she is an AI, right? But insofar as being another person, like, you know, all of the Lilim are just kind of people with their own quirks, you know? They have quirks that have been, like, programmed into them, but the feelings that they feel are no less real, and that's something that they kind of address and talk about. And I think Jill brings it up in relation to fiction specifically, which is that even if you know that something is fake, you know, you can feel emotions because of it that are very real and no less, like, valid because they were prompted by something that wasn't real, you know?
Right.
And it's just, like, obviously, you know, part of it is just a good reminder about, like, the reasons that we consume fiction, and another part of it is it feels very representative of the game as a whole, where a lot of it reminds you that it's a game. There are a lot of references to just things that the creators of the game like. Like, there's a lot of, like, professional wrestling stuff just because they like that.
Or, like, references to other properties in very, you know, sometimes overt, sometimes subtle ways.
Yeah, there are it's quite dense with references. I think it's kind of funny that, like, Dana is this character who is basically a, like, ex-professional wrestler slash action hero, basically.
Yes.
Who just happens to be, like, really into, just incidentally, just, like, really into, like, Japanese memes, like Japanese internet memes and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, she's kind of a weeb, and it's never really, like, talked about that much, other than, like, there'll be, like, an exchange where, you know, Dana says something and then Jill is like, what is she talking about? But you, dear viewer, know exactly what she's talking about.
Yeah, there's lots of nice little nods to the viewer like that. That goes over Jill's head, which is great.
So I would say that that's, like, it is, like, simultaneously the game's, like, greatest weakness in terms of its writing, but also one of its, like, most charming and, like, one of its most charming aspects and one of its strongest points is, again, the writing. Like, despite the fact that it's very clearly, like, there's a lot of artifice in how it is presented, but it nonetheless is valid. And I think that's cool. You know, obviously, if it is a game that is evocative of other games, you will think about those other games, right? And if it is based on, you know, PC 98 visual novels, then I think that's, like, somewhat the point. You know, I like that there are, like, there's no real dialogue options, you know? It's just,
like,
it is pretty much solely controlled by what drinks you're serving people. You know, you don't get a lot of input into, like, what Jill does or says or thinks because she's her own character.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
I like that a lot too, where because I feel like other games, I mean, especially visual novels, a lot of the gameplay comes from choosing different types of dialogue. But this game specifically markets itself as, you know, cyberpunk bartending action. So the main mechanic is you serving drinks, and then that influences the story, not necessarily you choosing dialogue options. Yeah, I do enjoy that this game has a very solid identity, which I think also lends to why it's so good as an indie game too. Because I feel like not necessarily lesser, but indie games that seem less experienced are ones that they struggle with an identity problem, right? or mixed messages, or like the themes don't quite come through, but I feel like all of that comes through pretty strongly in Valhalla, and I think that's why a lot of people resonate with it too.
I mean, I think it's really solid.
Yeah,
like,
I think it's
obviously
solid too.
some of it is just like the presentation and how well all of the like UI elements work together. Like one of the things that really takes me out of a game is when it still has like default like RenP menus, you know?
Yes, absolutely.
Like, and that's not to say that there isn't its own kind of charm, because there is.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it definitely is like one of those, like, you know, it just feels amateurish. And I think like the writing of Valhalla feels amateurish in a way that is like kind of sincere, and it's very clear that it was very thought about. Which is funny because I don't know, writing is like this just impossible task of trying to write fake words that you are convincing other people that they matter, you know? So just as far as a project goes, it's just a very like, you just kind of have to hand it to them, you know?
Oh yeah, of course.
You kind of just have to applaud the fact that this game got made at all and that it was successful, you know?
Yeah, totally. And I
yeah,
I was gonna say, we haven't touched on it, but I also love how the music contributes to.
Ooh, the music is so good.
Yes, the atmosphere. Yeah, it's so good. You even, like, as the bartender, you get to choose your playlist at the beginning of each day, but even with that, all the music feels like it fits the vibe of the situation. It's kind of strange.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think that like part of it is like because you get to choose the playlist. It's like just this little thing that is not a direct gameplay mechanic per se, right? You're functionally just putting together a playlist of like background music to play while you're reading text.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is an aspect of it that does work in the game's favor, in that because you get to preview what the music sounds like and you can kind of like curate the playlist to your own tastes, you know. You can there's a sort of extra layer to the experience of playing the game. You know, it like, for one, it adds to the routine of playing the game, in that it, you know, much like if you have ever worked in like food service and you've gone through the motions of like opening or closing, right? It feels a lot like, you know, you get in and the first thing that you do is you set up the playlist, right? So every day you get in and you set up the playlist.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it adds more immersion, essentially. Like you are part of the bar.
I think it's quite subtle too, because how you interact with the jukebox will depend a lot on how you are sort of as a player like of games. You know, you'll either like put one song on that you like and that's the only one on the playlist, right? It's just like, it's just Shine Spark like 16 times or whatever. Right? But sometimes, you know, you will change the playlist depending on what you think is like a good progression of songs, what you think just kind of fits the mood of the day. Like if the mood is more tense and you kind of want the game to reflect that, then you'll gravitate towards including songs reflective of that mood in your playlist, right? Obviously, I played the game a long time ago, and you know, I went through, listened to all of the song previews, and put together a little curated playlist. I think this time I just put "Your Love Is a Drug" on 16 times every day.
I love that song. I'm so glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just depends on how you feel, and it's nice that the game kind of lets you customize a little bit what is otherwise a very linear game.
Yeah, and I just like how subtle it is.
Yeah, very subtle.
It's such an understated part of the game, but
It
the
is.
fact that you open every day or every split with, turning on the jukebox it's just this little touch that is it just works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Dorothy is probably my favorite character. I want to wrap back around to this. Just because, like, obviously she has her own sort of arc about dealing with her mom situation. Because her guardian, right, who is the person who socializes a Lilim, right? Basically, did so after losing her daughter, who is, spoiler warning, obviously. Like, I don't know if you could get this far in with still being concerned about that. Who is Anna's mother, and just like wanting to make sure that she is sort of being seen as her own person and not just as a replacement for her, now gone daughter.
Right.
And I like that, like, Anna is just kind of this inexplicable existence that, wanders around. Only Jill can really see and hear her, except for a select few other characters who can, like, kind of see or hear her. It's implied that 4 can hear, can, like, see her. And there's moments where Dorothy can as well. Yeah, I don't know. I think Dorothy is just such a well put together character. I really like the fact that she is like an AI, maturity wise, she's like in her kind of early to mid 20s, but visually, like how she presents is like a little girl.
Yeah.
But she's also a sex worker.
Yep.
And it's something that she isn't like ashamed of or anything, right? She's just like a normal person that does a job, right? And part of that job is looking like you're 12. And like it's one of those things that's like it's just like unexpectedly hard hitting, I think, because it's like touching on very taboo topics, but in a way that makes a lot of sense, especially in the setting.
Yeah, she's very frank about it. The way that she talks about it is just very open and candid, and it's interesting because it does basically open up the conversation for you to ask questions, or she'll even just provide the answers to questions that she thinks that you're thinking about, right? She's like, oh yeah, by the way, Mega Santa and all this kind of stuff, right? Like she's very, because of her candidness about it, you feel like, okay, I mean, even though societally it still is taboo, it feels like you can still talk to her about these things and ask her about her life, and that in that way it makes her I mean, a stronger character, like in the game overall.
Yeah. Like there's just kind of an amount of like just how normalizing it is for a character in a game to be just like a sex worker, and that's just her job, and she likes her job. She doesn't hate it. She's not like being forced to do it. Like, this is what she chooses to do.
She chooses to do this. Yep.
And it's funny because it rides all of these like social taboo lines, and at the same time it just kind of feels like it all comes together to work. I like that Dorothy is just like a character with a pretty straightforward mentality. Like, she likes the things that she likes. She doesn't like the things that she doesn't like. You get to know her, and there's a very funny sequence where Dana just like pays her to like hug Jill for like an entire evening.
Yes.
Just funny. But yeah, I mean, I think that Dorothy is probably the best example of the characters in the game who are just so thoroughly thought about.
Yeah.
There is so much of Dorothy as a character that you see, but so much that you don't see that happens and is like sort of implied in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that, like, all of the patrons kind of have their, like, very normal problems.
Yeah.
It's something that we've touched on a lot. But, you know, I like that there's, like, just a random kid that comes in and tries to buy alcohol.
Yes! I like that you get a range of characters, like
Yeah.
like an age range, I should say. Yeah.
I actually quite like the entire little storyline about Norma. And I do think that one of the most, like, kind of, like, low-key deep things is, like, when Jill says, you know, if you're going to hurt somebody, you might as well do it doing something that you like instead of just hurting them for the sake of hurting them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it would be one thing if you wanted to drink alcohol, but if you don't even like it, then you probably shouldn't.
Yeah, like, what's the point?
Yeah, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there is, you know, Jill's whole deal about, you know, Lenore, and I kind of like it. It is a very, like, you know, it's almost like a cliche, right? For this to be the theme of, like, oh, somebody who is young but is getting older feels the impending dread of the coming years. And, like, and having your life decided for you. Like, I think it's just one of those things where you, on some level, sympathize with Jill and you understand, like, yeah, I would feel pretty stupid if I just, like, never made up over this, like, over this fight. But at the same time, you kind of also understand where she's coming from in terms of, like, being in a relationship and having somebody decide things for you.
Right.
That you don't feel comfortable with. And how that is just, like, a very slippery slope. And how, you know, you wake up and you realize you're 40 years old and you hate your job. And, that's real. Obviously.
Yeah, it is real. Yep.
I mean, there's a reason why that's, like, the young adult to adult, like, thing, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, the midlife crisis thing.
Right, yeah.
It's just, like, you just very much get a sense of both the, like, age range of the creators and also, like, you know, their experiences. I kind of like that there's, like, other pretty much, like, absolutely not, like, inconsequential problem. Like Betty, who is, like, basically, like, I have identified as a lesbian my entire life, but I think I might like this boy, but also he's a Lilim, so he's, like, also, like, a robot.
Yes.
Right? And how do I deal with this?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I like that they have a relationship that is very much just, like, two people who are very close to each other, who, like, you can tell. I've definitely, like, this is one of those dynamics that, like, you see, right, out in the world, of just two people who, even if they are not in a relationship with each other, are just very clearly meant to be together, just, like, insofar as, like, they should be there to support each other and, you know, be there for each other.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be romantic. I mean, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but you support the fact that they're a very good fit for each other, just as people. Yeah.
It's funny because there is another story. This is very funny. Okay. I'm gonna take a little, like, aside here to talk shit about dudes.
Oh. Okay.
This is like a complete aside. I think it's so funny. And this is, like, one of those things where I am absolutely throwing bricks from inside of a glass house, right? But there's just something very quintessentially, like, oh yes, like, men wrote this about, like, making a game in which half of the characters are women and half of those women are lesbians.
Uh-huh.
No, that's it.
That's okay, that's the break. Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
I always got the sense like that yes, it was written by men, but also that it's a game that is definitely more interested in its female characters than its male characters.
Oh yeah, I think that's definitely true.
Yeah, I do respect the fact that it has male characters in it and they're pretty interesting, but it just is very apparent that yeah. Uh-huh.
I just think that they're handled very differently.
They're handled
right?
differently, yeah.
Because all of the generally speaking, all of the game revolves around these female characters.
Yes.
And like you have Jill,
Mm-hmm.
who is at least confirmed to be like bisexual. You know, she was in a really serious relationship with another woman, but she's also had like many previous boyfriends, right?
Yeah.
You have Dana, who is probably like pan, just insofar as like there is one canonical relationship that she has implied in the game's text with another woman who is a character from Read Only Memories, I think. And then you have like one incidental character who is a gay man.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then you have Stella and Say, who are just like, again, two of those just people that you can tell are just very close to each other.
Yes.
Like, the implication is very much like they're basically married, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
I think everybody knows people like this, like two people that are basically married to each other.
They're basically married. They
right?
spend
Even
all
if
their
they're
time
not
with each other.
Right, even if they're not in like a romantic relationship, they're basically married.
Yeah, and they take care of each other. They worry about each other. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like childhood friends, and they got all that stuff going on.
Yeah. Yeah. It does to me feel like speaking on how differently the male and female characters are handled, it feels like the men are handled almost like in a hands-off kind of way. Like it feels like with the female characters, you kind of get more deep dives into their lives.
I think that's definitely it. You don't dive as deeply into the male character's life.
Yeah.
And the only real exception to this is if you I think if you serve a lot of alcohol to Ingram, who's a character that comes in a couple of times, then he'll like trauma dump on you about like his like dead wife and daughter or whatever.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that is like the one example of like a male character that has like something really deep going on. Because otherwise, you know, the male characters that you interact with are Gil, whose entire shtick is like he has something going on, but you'll never learn what it is.
Yeah.
Because he does have a resolution to his arc, which is that like he gets to essentially leave his old life behind and start this new one, working at this bar. It's a second chance, basically.
Yeah.
He was running from something. We don't know exactly what it is. There's implication, you know. And then there's Gil's friend Jamie, who is like a bounty hunter, and he has like some interesting stuff going on as well. But he's definitely not like. I mean, I think part of it is also like I think Jamie might probably be one of the oldest guys you get. But,
yes.
Like, he's just like, you know. You get less of Jamie's sort of internal feelings and more like he just kind of is there to like tell you about stuff. And when you learn things about him, it's like, you know, it's like learning like about how he got this like nanomachine purge process done.
Right.
Yeah, and I think like the only other male character I can think of off the top of my head is Art Von Delay. Who?
Uh-huh.
Oh no, that's not true. Wait. There's there's Virgilio.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking of Virgilio.
Yeah, and he also has some stuff going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of it also is just like, definitely there's a part of it that is also just the fact that Jill is just kind of closer to the women who frequent the bar.
Right.
Which I think is fair and valid. You know, I think that is, I don't think it's intentional that the game is written this way, but it's just very like, yes, a man wrote this, and not like necessarily in a derisive way, right? Because I do think that part of it is just making sure to include a broad range of experiences, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the fact that, you know, Jill's probably bi, Dana's probably pan, Betty's an unapologetic lesbian, but she's also having some, like, questioning feelings about her own sexuality.
Yes.
You know, all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know anything about Anna.
Not like in full detail.
Okay. Yeah. So her backstory is actually quite similar to Jill's in a kind of way, or like I guess you could also say kind of like Lenore's.
Right.
Where she suffered from the nanomachine rejection, and finally when she was cured of it, and this is like one of those things that's like, it's like kind of a joke, but it's also kind of like, man, it's kind of a bummer, right?
Yeah.
She's like cured of her nanomachine rejection, and then she walks out of the hospital and gets hit by a truck and dies.
Oh, right. I do remember reading that. Yeah.
But yeah, and that's stuff that you can learn. You learn in the game. I think that offhand, Dorothy mentions that she had that Anna had a girlfriend in the hospital who also had nanomachine sensitivity rejection. And she also died, right? So in that way, like, Anna's very much like Jill. If you want to know more about her perspective, you can actually go to itch.io and read Sapphic Pussy Rhapsody, which is a little like side story written by the writer of Valhalla, which is completely from Anna's perspective. It's pretty interesting, and it makes a lot. You know, it fills in a lot of like the Anna like holes, I guess you could say, and explains a lot about her character. It is very much in a similar vein to Valhalla proper, in that it's like writing, you know, writing TM. It feels like writing TM. Like writing that is like self-aware enough to know that it is coming across as writing, but either can't or doesn't feel like changing it so that it doesn't. In a way that I think is like, I don't know, there is something inherently charming to me about it. Maybe because it reminds me of my own writing.
Sure.
Yeah. You know, sometimes you just read some writing and you're like, yeah, somebody wrote this, you know? But yeah, there's a lot of like miscellaneous sort of extra material on the internet. The creators have been quite, you know, active in doing other stuff, right? There's like the short story. There's a little April Fool's game that you can also play on itch, called Valhalla Kids. It is, I think this is really cool. It's illustrated by an artist who drew a ton of Valhalla fan art until eventually the creators were like, yeah, this is really cool, and they basically hired them to like do some stuff for them.
That's awesome.
And I think that they actually have like worked on the next game that they're releasing.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm really excited to see what other content they'll come out with.
Yeah, I think that kind of thing is really cool. I like how much of a grounded, like, it kind of feels like a community effort almost.
Right, yeah. That's really nice.
Yeah. And there are games like I mean, geez, right? It's been 8 years since Valhalla came out, right? So, there have been games that have been inspired by Valhalla,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
The one that I can think of, and I think the one probably most people would think of, is Coffee Talk.
Hmm.
And I think there are 2 of those games now. But that game
Oh.
basically like takes the Valhalla drink mechanic and just, twists it a little bit to be about serving coffee. And I
Oh.
think the setting is basically like, it's like a modern fantasy, right? I think
Oh.
it's like alt Seattle, but like there's like elves and stuff.
Oh.
So,
Yeah, I'm looking at the Steam page now. Yeah.
so yeah, again, that's like one of those games that's just like very clearly inspired by Valhalla.
Oh, yeah.
And no doubt there are like a bunch of visual novels that are inspired by Valhalla that are out there.
Sure.
It was, I don't know. I feel like the it's funny because the mid 2010s, I feel like, was just a very like weirdly good time for indie visual novel games.
Sure.
And I feel like a lot of that is like you could feel that the effects of them in games that are inspired by those games, stuff like Doki Doki Literature Club.
Sure. Yeah. That makes sense. That was quite a time for visual novels, and I think probably around that time or before that time was like little JRPGs, like those kind of like bite-sized ones.
Yeah.
Like really intense stories.
I mean, to be fair, those I think date a little bit earlier, right? Stuff like
Yeah. Right. Yes.
So, but yeah, I mean the visual novels, and there are like certain eras to visual novels, but like there is a definite era of visual novels that Valhalla belongs to.
Yes.
Which I think in retrospect is kind of cool.
I do too. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I think that's it. I think if anything that we've talked about kind of appeals to you, then I recommend checking the game out. It's I think it's a great experience. It's not too long. It doesn't overstay its welcome.
Time.
Yeah, it's well worth your time for sure. Visually, it's great. The writing is fun. The music is awesome. Yeah, definitely recommend checking it out.
All right.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
Hello, I am Swan, also known as Renu. You can find me on the internet at SwanDrawn. You can find me Instagram at swan.drawn. I'm currently recovering from a cold, so if I sounded a little different than usual, it's because of someone sneezing on me at my last convention.
The con flu.
Ah, yes. I avoided it all year. I was so proud of myself, and I managed up until the very last convention of the summer.
Man, it's always the last one.
It's always the last one, but at least I get a good amount of time to recover from it.
Feels bad.
Yeah. But other than that, I've been playing Bloodborne on Twitch, on my Twitch channel.
Nice.
That's been so fun. It's my first FromSoft game. And I plan on getting into Elden Ring as well, because I've been having such a great time with Bloodborne. So yeah, if you want to see that, I've been streaming it every Friday night. So if you guys want to see that, you can check me out on Twitch. That's one drawn.
One day they'll release a Bloodborne PC port. I'll get to play Bloodborne.
Do you think so? I feel like Sony's just kind of like buried it into the ground and left it there.
It does kind of feel like that, honestly.
Yeah. But maybe we'll see. I don't know. Maybe I'll be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it comes out.
Well, I mean, on the bright side, like, until then, there's Elden Ring and Sekiro on the PC, so
that's
we'll
true.
just play those.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you?
You can find me all the places at Literal Soup. If I'm on a place, it's there. And to be honest, I have not been up to terribly much, internet-wise, other than I guess you can go to my YouTube page and watch my Final Fantasy XIV montages, even though they'll make approximately 0 sense to anybody who is not like at least decently experienced with the game, because that game sometimes is just like a visual mess. It is just incomprehensible, I swear.
Right.
but I do my best to make it readable.
That's nice.
Yep. So yeah, there's that. We will probably have another episode out in about a month or so.
Uh-huh.
And yeah. Welcome back, podcast.
Yay!
Yippee! Yeah, we will probably do like a little mini seasonal check-in at the beginning of the episode instead of doing a full seasonal episode. Just because it's just so hard to keep up with these things. It's actually quite a lot more convenient to just check in at the beginning of an episode, like when we can record an episode, rather than have to wait for the first time that we can block out some time after every episode of a season has aired, right?
Yeah, I mean, and we did like kind of pull around for interest on our Discord and on our YouTube channel too, to figure out like what you guys think about, our seasonal dives and also our series like deep dives. And it seems like there's more interest in just focusing on specific series. So being able to just kind of like touch on anime that we've been watching on the season, like at the beginning of the episode, and then go into like a more serious deep dive into whatever property that we choose. That seems like a better approach for us.
I mean,
for
if
you guys,
if there is something that really piques my interest, then we'll probably talk about it anyway.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, we'll probably end up making an entire episode about it.
Yeah.
Which I think probably would just be better overall. I think it just gives everything a little bit more room to breathe.
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
much more convenient for our schedule.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Well, so yeah, that's it for housekeeping stuff.
Yay.
Our opening is by Scotchy Network, and our ending is by Takamakata. And the patrons we are thanking today are Evan Williams, Claire, Cherubel, Magpie Mirror Test, Devin Baker, Sean Dow, and Dylan Boats. Thank you so much.
Wow,
much
thank you
for your
guys.
support.
Yes.
It is always it is always a humbling reminder that that people listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
Even if you have just set up a pledge per month and then forgotten about it, we appreciate you nonetheless.
We appreciate the support regardless.
All right, we will see you next time.
See you next time.
さようなら。また明日ね。